Alright, got a little update here. Going to cover a few things, starting with the Checkmate display that you see me unpacking in the video. It arrived today. Actually, there were two. I got a white one and a black one. And I got a carrying case because nothing screams uber geek like carrying around a full-sized monitor. If you're not familiar with the Checkmate displays, they are 4:3 ratio IPS displays meant to be used with retro devices. They have different bays in the back, meant to be used with various modules, such as a Raspberry Pi or Mister mounting kit, and a retro scaler, so you can use things like SCART and component, composite, S-video, and any other kind of input you're likely to want to use with retro machines. I filmed a lot of this footage using my GoPro, and if you look, you'll see that there's some color bleeding going on, some light that's coming around from the light areas into the dark areas, and this is not an artifact of the monitor. This is in fact from my GoPro because the lens was dirty and I had no idea till after I was done filming. Anyway, the image quality is pretty good on these things, and the latency is supposed to be extremely low. Using the monitor with the Analog Duo, I couldn't detect any latency. Playing games like Blazing Lasers and other timing critical shooters, but with the Polymega, I think the latency added by that machine was far greater than anything you're likely to detect with this monitor. Of course, this monitor isn't really geared towards emulation, unless of course you count Mister as emulation, and that's a subject I'm not getting into. Like it or hate it, a lot of people want to debate whether or not Mister's emulation or FPGA's emulation, and I really don't have an opinion. I know that the latency is not there. Mister is a whole lot more accurate to the real thing than any kind of emulation you're going to get on Raspberry Pis or any of them other little single board computers, and even a PC running MAME. Mister is the real deal, so unless you're using real hardware, Mister is probably about as good as you're going to get. Now, this monitor, of course, was designed to be used with real hardware, so if you've got an old Amiga kicking around, or a Sega Saturn, or any of those machines, this is probably going to be one of your best bets for a modern display. Now, as they're sold right now, they ship with IPS displays, and there is going to be an upgraded panel, a Arcuda panel, that's supposed to be even better than this one, so that'll be something to keep an eye on. I, of course, picked these monitors up to use with my retro devices, all of the classic consoles plus my Amigas, and maybe even an old PC or two. Not to mention all of the FPGA devices, such as the Analog Duo and the Analog 3D if it ever ships, and of course the Mister, which, I'm a big fan of. So, the Analog Duo, the Mister, and of course real hardware, that's where this monitor is going to really shine. And since I have a lot of old devices, naturally a display like this could come in really handy. Now, there are other solutions for using retro devices with modern displays, such as the RetroTink and other scalers, but I would kind of prefer use these devices with a native 4.3 display. One thing I really do like about these displays is how deep they are. Now, they're not as deep as an original CRT, but they do leave enough room to put things inside of, like the scalers and the Raspberry Pis or the Misters, and there's something nice about embedding those devices directly inside the monitor case. And of course, there is the built-in speakers, which a lot of modern monitors do not contain. Now, of course, a lot of people do use televisions as monitors, and there's nothing wrong with that, but having a display purpose-built for this use really comes in handy. Now, it will output HDMI and it will output audio as well, so if you wanted to hook up an external display and maybe other speakers, it looks like that is an option. I haven't played with any of that stuff yet. In fact, there's a lot of things in this monitor I haven't played with yet, but from what I've seen so far, I think for most people who have a decent retro collection, this is going to be pretty much covering all of the bases that you could possibly need. I do think this monitor might be cost prohibitive for anybody who isn't just a retro enthusiast, because a decent television that has classic inputs, composite component, they're not impossible to find. And of course, there are scalers out there that you could use. Now, a lot of people don't want to put the money down for a RetroTink, and I get that. That RetroTink 4K is something like $800 or something, and I think a monitor like this is a whole lot cheaper than a high-end scaler. But for the average gamer, just plugging in your machine to a standard television is probably good enough. And while we can split hairs discussing the latency added by emulation versus running games on FPGA machines, such as anything by Analog or the Mister, the truth is, for most players, playing retro games on an emulator is probably good enough. If you're a purist, then you probably already have a decent CRT laying around, so something like this is really niche, and I get that. However, I have a lot of machines from a lot of different eras, and having the plethora of inputs is really handy for me. There's also something kind of cool about the idea of embedding a Mister inside this thing and carrying around a fully fledged emulation machine that is both the monitor and the system is kind of appealing to me. Now, of course, I can do that with a laptop, but once again, we get into the whole, is it emulation versus simulation? And like I said, that's a debate I'm not going to have. If you like emulation, fine. I do my share of emulating. I get it. But there's just something about playing games on original hardware or really, really, really close simulation, the kind that you get from FPGA. And unless you've experienced that and spent a lot of time playing it, or if you're a speedrunner and the little nuances that come with the timing critical features of a game matter to you, then you probably won't understand. I am excited to see what kind of improvement the Arcuda panels will bring to the table when they're released, but next to a CRT, I don't think you're going to get much better than this IPS display or the Arcuda. And for, I would say, almost all cases, they're going to be good enough. Now, of course, I'm going to take my 32-inch Trinitron over any LCD or OLED panel any day for retro games, but I'm not about to carry around a 32-inch Trinitron, so until you can find a way to stuff that thing in a hand sack and carry it around, I think I'll take this for right now. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. There's no fuselage news for the moment. So, have some sausage, drink some beer, play some games, you know the deal. Oh, and don't even think about subscribing. Yep, just avoid that little button down there. Yep, don't do it.